Hey Reddit, what is the strangest coincidence you have ever personally experienced? My old work ran a Secret Santa once the week before Christmas. It was a 10 limit and the person I was buying for I did not know very well. I left my buying to the last minute because I just did not know what to get her. So I was in town and walking past some shops when lo and behold, I see an old copy of Oliver Twist in the window of the second-hand bookstore. It just called to me. So I went in and picked it up. I checked the first page for the cost and guess what? 10 minus perfect. So come the day of the Secret Santa, we were all opening our gifts, some 150 people. Out of the corner of my eye I see some people crowding around a woman who is crying. I keep listening and people are calling out for the person who was her Santa. I go over and reveal that it was me. The lady I had bought for was crying and hugged me. She said 10 years ago her house burned down along with all her of possessions. The book that I bought her was her favorite and also the exact same edition, so had the exact same cover she remembered. Because it was a second-hand book it was even weathered in the same place as she remembered, so it was as if I did grab the book off her shelf before the fire and delivered it to her 10 years later. Here in my little town in northwest England there is a good kebab shop from which the lads and I have ordered for years. We have been in there after countless nights out and had them deliver to our doors, so we know the guys who work there pretty well. They are mostly Turkish. Once a few of us got together for a short break in Turkey. Having got off the plane, we waited in the car park outside for another pal who had been on a different flight. As we stood, soaking in the ambience of a new country, none other than the tall guy from our local kebab shop walked across the road right in front of us. 2,000 miles from home, that was weird. Seeing Paul McCartney the Beatles on TV in 2001, and noticing he was tall. Next day I am walking down a very quiet street, and walking towards me is a really tall guy. And it was Paul McCartney. He must have seen my expression so he veered my way, stuck his hand out and said hi mate. I was shocked. 18 years later I am still shocked lol. Edit I am 6 feet 1. Turns out he is 5 feet 11. Maybe he was just lanky. He certainly appeared tall to me. I should also add that he did not just stick his hand out. I meant to say he shook my hand. Crazy. He then briskly walked away. A very brief encounter but a really important one for me. I also would not blame anyone for not believing me. It is a weird story. I used to get 2 buses home from work. I got off the first one having left my phone and keys on the front seat of the bus without realizing. Got on the second bus, went to my favorite front seat and my possessions that I didn't know were missing were waiting for me. The bus had changed driver en route. Still freaks my nut out to this day. Nobody believes me when I tell this story, but one day my husband and I ran into the same couple at 3 different places, in 2 different states. So my husband and I had an errand to run out of state. We leave early and stop to get breakfast. The couple was sitting across from us. The lady had on a funky shirt which is why she stuck out in my mind. After breakfast we drive the next state over to the office we have an appointment at. We are waiting in the lobby and the couple from the breakfast joint walks in. Weird. So we spend the day finishing up our errands and then we drive back home. I did not feel like cooking so we stopped to get some dinner at the pub. We sit down at the table and guess who is already eating at the table behind us? The same friggin' couple. I was in St. Augustine on vacation. On the way there I just happened to think about this girl I knew back in college in Orlando. Just sorta wondered what she was up to and the like. Sure as shit I ran into her in a bar there the first night. She was there celebrating graduating from PA school. Me and a friend took some acid one night and were tripping hard. Decided to walk to a gas station and get some smokes or something. We walked by a car lot in the small town I am from and all of the cars in the lot were cop cars. We were both walking Ranrod straight all the way to the store. Very quietly bought whatever we went there for and took a back street back to his place. We just stared at each other for like an hour and did not speak after we got there. Turns out the city had bought a whole new fleet of cop cars and they had all been delivered there and were on the lot for just that night. Was sitting in a restaurant about 200 miles from where I live telling my mother, who was visiting from a different country, about a trip I had to another country about 6,000 miles away with a work colleague, and the lady at the table next to us leans over and says, "I think you are talking about my son." Turns out I was sitting next to my colleague's parents while showing my mum pictures of our trip. In grade 10 English class, the teacher did not have anything planned for us to do, and it was close to the end of the year one guess, so she goes to the big pupil board in the corner and pulls out a stack of copies. It is examples of a successful essay written during a final exam, so we can learn what a good one looks like and how to build a narrative, etc. The topic of these was, what was the most pivotal moment of your life? There is 3 examples, ranging in proficiency. We read through the first 2, and I volunteer to read the last one aloud. I start reading, and I stop. The essay was about me. My big sister had gotten a really good mark 6 years earlier on her final exam essay, which she wrote about the day I was born. I got pretty emotional about that one. Worked half day, drove 6 hours from Southern California to Northern California for car camping with my wife, chose obscure campground which was neatly deserted off-season, picked the most deserted and remote campsite location. We planned on rock in the tent. Were bummed after setting camp and another couple selects site right next to us. Turns out to be a CO worker I'd spoken with earlier that day. Edit: I hadn't told CO worker anything about plans. We weren't close. Earlier that day we spoke briefly of work-related issue. My wife and I were in Tucson visiting my mother who just moved there. My wife decided she wanted tamale. We drove around for 2 hours stopping in restaurants looking for tamales, couldn't find one, went back to my mother's apartment. Literally 2 minutes later somebody knocked on the door of my mother's apartment asking us if anyone wanted to buy any tamales. 1 year one got a roommate through Craigslist. The guy was weird for sure, but good-natured and paid rent. Anyway, after about 2 months of living with him, my cousin comes over to hang. I introduced the two, and my cousin in the most chill voice ever said, "Nah man, we know each other." Turns out they were college roommates 5 years earlier in another state. Not me, but a pretty interesting story in my family. 2 of my great-grandfathers got imprisoned in the same jail, and served time together. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was an architect and even drew my other great-grandfather's house. My sister, Emily, was on a ski lift in New Mexico when some younger girl across from her asked if her name was Emily. Apparently the stranger, who kind of looked similar but underage, had found her lost ID the year prior and had been using it for a year to buy alcohol. Edit: after this blew up I texted my sister, who reminds me it was weirder. She was later hiking with friends for 17 hours. They got tired, thumbed for a hitchhike and got picked up by this girl's twin. I moved from my small hometown, halfway across the country, to a small city where I knew absolutely no one. At the first party I went to in the new town, I started chatting with a guy. Turns out he had also just left my small hometown. I met a Canadian guy while on holiday in South America and we ended up going sightseeing together. At the end of the day a person behind us tapped him on the shoulder and asked if the scar behind his ear was from cancer surgery. They got talking. Turns out they were from the same small town in Canada, had the same type of brain cancer and had been operated on by the same surgeon. Was at the dentist getting a crown extension. Dentist: hey, you were born on July 13th. So was I. Assistant: me too. We all shared a look of surprise and longing with each other, longing to be closer. Then they drilled the absolute duck out of my teeth. Edit: oh god, it is happening again. Had a kidney transplant last year. Nurse makes a comment about it having my name on it. He elaborated to say that the donor has the same surname as me. An officer from a different PD was showing me a picture of a guy they wanted to arrest in a different part of town. As I looked up from the computer, I see dipshit riding by on a bike, literally 5 feet away from the squad car. 2 years ago I was in Tokyo on holiday. I looked on Instagram and saw an old friend post a story showing he was also in Tokyo. We hadn't spoken in a few years, but I sent him a message letting him know we were in the same city. Not even 5 minutes later, we walked into a bar and he was standing there. This past November, I was in Toronto on business. After dinner, we went to a pub downtown. The first person I saw when I walked in was the same friend from Tokyo. We both live in Winnipeg. Told this story elsewhere, but I am making you all read it again. Was at a convention. There were only a few people in the room. My friend and I wanted an autograph from a voice actor. He started singing in his character voice. There were 2 random guys next to me. One pulled out a video camera to record it. Years later, my husband and I are talking with friends, and the convention comes up. The guy with the video camera was my husband. I also took a picture later that day of the crowds, and he is in that picture. I stood next to my husband years before I met him. Edit. Thank you to everyone who shared their stories. Amazing how our lives can intersect. And a big thank you to the Redditor who gifted Silver. It's a major award. I have an uncommon last name and a not too common first name. I was in the hospital for a surgery and the person in the next room was there for the same surgery. Come to find out that we were second cousins and never knew that the other existed. He had the same name as me and his wife had the same name as my wife. The pastor of church where I was musician informed me that a wedding couple would be coming to see me after Sunday services to discuss music for their forthcoming ceremony. It turned out to be a girl I dated in high school that I had not seen or heard from since graduation and her fiancé. She remembered my organ playing from back then and already knew what pieces she wanted. I did not even have to demonstrate. I have had several small world experiences, but the biggest was talking to a girl after my first university class and discovering through the course of a 2-hour-long conversation that our grandmothers had been each other's maid of honor and my aunt and her mom were best friends since childhood. Back in the early mid-90s the phone system changed and you no longer needed to dial the area code for a long-distance in-state call. We are a small state with only one area code. One morning I woke up to the phone ringing and when I picked up I recognized the voice on the other end as belonging to my old boss from a few years ago. She had an unmistakable voice. We had a nice conversation for a bit before she realized she had dialed the wrong number. I lived in a different town in a different part of the state, but the number must have been off by only 1 digit from the one she had tried to call. To add to the coincidence, I had overslept and would have been late for work if she had not called me and woken me up. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.